Oh, and mine's on jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess. And your wizard just barely escaped Tammy's trailer. Her trailer is in ruins. You've destroyed half the trailer park. However, you find yourself incarcerated as the police caught up with you and arrested you because of the amount of damage you caused. You're in the holding cell right now awaiting questioning. What does your wizard do? I cast Fireball! I put way too much sauce on that. But we just did a live stream and we went in on the Divo Stassa23 Fireball. Now, let's take a look at what we're holding, because it'll bother you if I don't, and you know I'm too kind to you. So, first things first, and most importantly, the pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. We've got the titanium backspacer right here. We got the 80s camo carbon. We've got the thumb hole. Let's flick the hole. And we got 3.25 inches of S90V steel. And of course, all of our furniture right here is PVD-coated titanium. Now, that's all out of the way. And first off, this was provided by you guys. You guys wanted to see this thing being tested and put through Cardboard Slayer, so thank you for that. Let me say right now, this thing is so damn foxy that there are birds on a 6-month waiting list to appear singing whenever you pull this out of your pocket, alright? I love this 80s camo carbon, and I carried this guy for a week, and I absolutely loved it. You know, showing it off was a ton of fun, you know, because guys that aren't knife guys and don't know the 80s camo carbon exists were pretty blown away by it. They absolutely love seeing it. And, you know, it fidgeted really well. You've only got your 2 opening methods. Of course, you got your hole right here. Let's flick the hole again. And, of course, you can centrifugal open. I don't know if I can get it under the camera, but yeah, it centrifugal opens. It's a little bit difficult to centrifugal open. Of course, this thing is not oiled that well. It's probably packed with cardboard dust and everything else, but it is riding on ceramic bearings, so it makes the action feel really smooth. Overall, very well built. Now, let's get into the experience with Cardboard Slayer, and I have to give you the disclaimer. You know, we keep track of this with the amount of time spent cutting, okay? We can't keep track of each individual cut or the number of feet/inches we covered. However, we're talking about hours spent cutting every second or so, 4 to 7 inches, and that's how we keep track of it. We counted it one time, it was like 900 cuts in 30 minutes, like not even exaggerating, and so that gives you an idea just how much cardboard we're pushing through. And of course, if you want to see how much it went through, really, just go back and watch the live stream. You're going to be sitting there for a while, but there are receipts. So, let's go over our timeline of events. Let's go over the timeline of events here because we got a lot to get into. We've got everything written down here. So we started at a 193. We started at 193 on the sharpness tester that I'll show you in a little while. And we gave it an hour. And we pulled a 474 up in the front belly. And we pulled a 452 back towards the back belly. You know, that was a little bit of rapid wear, but that happens on a lot of steels. After a half hour, we picked up a 549 towards the front here. Towards the center, we pick up a 616. That 616 is kind of a devastated edge you kind of have to sharpen. So it took an hour and a half to wipe the factory edge out. The factory edge hadn't seen much more than a couple of cuts through cardboard before we did this. Very, very gentle carry to preserve that factory edge for Cardboard Slayer. So we sharpened this thing at 16.75 degrees per side. We got her down to a 129. Nice sharp edge. I love that kind of edge. So after an hour, we again hit a 415 towards the belly and in the front here, and a 422 right in the belly. So we went for another hour, and at the 2-hour mark, we had a 468 back here in the belly, and then towards the belly tip, we hit a 465, and then the back here, somewhere in here, we hit a 395. So we went for our next hour, and we had to split this up over 2 live streams. It was a lot of work. But we hit a 573 back here in the belly. Towards the belly and the heel, we hit a 335, and towards the belly tip, we hit a 645. I'm not sure what's up with that number because it was still cutting like it wasn't at 645, but sometimes that reader does give you an aberration, which is why we test multiple areas and get multiple samples. You're only testing an area as wide as the wire on that test clip, so sometimes you see some weird numbers. We went for another hour. We caught a 566 up here in the belly and a 467 up here. So that's what I'm saying, like, you know, I pulled a strange number, but the numbers at the 4-hour mark definitely lined up more with what I should have seen an hour ago. So, yeah, that 616 may have been a bit of an aberration, or I found a tiny, really, really bad spot. Either one is likely. So we went for another hour, and at the 5-hour mark, we had a 538 in the belly and a 423 up in the belly tip. Again, it just moves around a little bit. You'll get different numbers, and I probably hit an area that wasn't used as much. Now, we hit 5.5 hours. we hit 5.5 hours, and we pulled a 636 in here in the belly, like a clean one. We picked a 428 back this way and a 562 up this way. That was when it started cutting like garbage. Doing the push cut on the paper, it wouldn't make it through it anymore. It was definitely toast. So we took this thing and we sharpened it back down to a 109. We sharpened it down to a 109. That's what I got on the tester. Now let's break the tester out so I can show you guys what I'm talking about. And you guys kindly provided this as well. Aw, my Kershaw cards. But you guys kindly provided this as well. I will always be grateful for the support to the channel. That was donations, that was channel memberships, what have you. Thank you for that. I'll always be grateful to you guys for stuff like this. The support means a lot. It really means a lot. So what we're doing here is we're measuring the number of grams of force it takes to cut through the wire on this calibrated test clip. You can see right here what I mean when you're testing an area as thick as this wire. So your numbers are going to move around a little bit, and this is just giving you a ballpark idea of how sharp things are, and it's quantifying something that's otherwise very hard to quantify on camera. But everyone stand back. I'm arming the boy. All right, come close. It's safe. It's safe. Let's see what we get this time. It'll be different than the 109. I guarantee it. A 121. So that's really close. Like, it took such a good edge. It took such a good edge at that 3000 grit. It took such a good edge. This notebook paper that I have right here is significantly harder to get a clean push cut on than the printer paper is, but that is such a beautiful cut, you guys. Like, this thing took an edge like nobody's business. So that's kind of how things went over the course of the night. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Like I'd mentioned, the factory edge, I hated what I did to it. It was not set up for Cardboard Slayer an hour and a half before failure. And we sharpened it up to 16.75 degrees, and I was having two thoughts about that. One, I forgot to check the angle until we were halfway through sharpening, and two, I didn't think that'd be a big deal because I expected this to be harder and a much, much more wear-resistant edge than D2, say. And if I'd have known it was going to wear as quickly as it did, I would have done 17 to 18 degrees per side on a micro bevel to compensate for how fine of an edge we put on it. We gave it the whole schmagoygan up to 3000 grit and polished it on the strops, and I will say right now, it was easier to sharpen than its reputation had me preparing for. And I would have handled sharpening differently if I had done the research I did later on in the night. We'll get into that in a minute. But the way it wore once I put a new edge on it was kind of interesting. In the first hour, it took a lot of damage. A lot of steels do that, and the edge was probably a little bit too fine. But it stabilized in those high numbers for the next couple of hours. Like, it stabilized and stayed in there for a long time. The last couple of hours, it was kind of a slower descent into the devastated edge. And, it was a slower wear than D2 does. It felt like supercharged D2. The wear felt very, very close to D2. It just felt like D2 plus. Like, the D2 part 2 just dropped. So the only major difference between the way D2 wears and the way this wears was really this was a much smoother descent into a devastated edge. Because D2 in the last 30 minutes, it'll go from like 450 down to like 650. Like, it will just fall off in the last half hour. So, with the 5.5 hours on the edge, it lined up mostly with what I saw. Finally, I looked up what I should have looked up in the first place, but I had no reason to think of it. But I look up S90V versus MagnaCut. S90V has got, more edge retention than D2 and a little bit less edge retention than S90V, or MagnaCut. Sorry. A lot of words in a short time. But, it's going to wear out a little faster than MagnaCut does. And of course, if the edge wasn't as fine, it definitely would have lasted a lot longer. I felt like if I did a 17 to 17.5 degrees per side, we probably could have gotten another hour and a half out of it. It's not a huge change, but edge geometry is a big deal. And, the next thing to mention is a deeper hollow grind. The deeper hollow grind, it always adds a lot of resistance to the cardboard cutting, and it makes it feel like a wedge that you're pushing through. My Kershaw cards. Stay. But, it puts some resistance on that push cut. Those hollow grinds always make it harder to push through cardboard. This was no exception. Now, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be going into it. It was just some extra resistance compared to a full flat grind, but it did good. It did good. And the ergonomics, they were great. The ergonomics are great. You know, a grand total of 7 hours spent cutting between 2 sessions and nothing, no major discomfort. You know, all I felt was the pressure right here, like you might be able to see the callus I've developed over a bunch of Cardboard Slayer streams. All I felt was the pressure from it being pushed on a whole lot. Normally, it'll fall into the gap right back here and it will get chewed up because the gap's so wide. But you can see the gap's not that wide, like it's no wider than the blade basically. The bearings have good clearancing on them. And so there's a little bit of chamfer and there's a little bit of dingus in covering here. So it really, really did a good job protecting my hand from, you know, again, 7 hours of dicing up cardboard. So, yeah, it didn't cause major issues. It was real nice to work with, even with that extra resistance. So, you know, that's kind of our timeline of events, you know, and overall, I'm really, really happy with what I'm seeing here. You know, Kubi's our OEM. They did a great job on the steel. They did a great job with the fit and finish. The design is great. Like, it's really well thought out. It did really good. And, you know, it's just wonderful. It's wonderful. And, you know, if you were to carry this day in and day out, you would be just fine and well taken care of outside of the fear of maybe losing it somehow. Like, I would be terrified of losing this thing. I'm not going to lie. You know, and, like, these things dropped and they sold out like that. It was maybe 10 minutes before they were gone. You know, I was in the parking lot at work and I was just hitting refresh. I left for work about a half hour early so I could be in the parking lot when it dropped. And it's just refresh. And as soon as they popped up, bye. Like, I wasn't even sure my payment went through properly. I was just like, anything it took to get in the door and get it. And fortunately, it went through. Everything went smoothly. And, you know, here we are together in this point in space and time. You know, and it's unfortunate because that means it's only on the secondary market if you want to find one. And, you know, it's a shame that they're not more on sale right now. There may or may not be a second run. I had talked to Kevin, Lefty EDC, via email before this thing dropped because I bought a prototype and I was trying to find more information on what was going to happen there. And he showed me the HRC tester at 61 HRC. You know, he showed me a lot and told me a lot about what was going to happen. And he said there may be a second run. He doesn't know yet. You know, and it's just, like, I'm a big fan of Divo. Everything I have handled feels about as good as this does. Everything that I've handled looks about as good as this does. Like, the designs are always really good, really well thought out. They're not slapped together, and they are aimed at EDC carry and looking really good while you're doing it. You know, like, I love Divo, and get glazed, idiot! But no, seriously, I'm not trying to glaze them too hard. I'm just a big fan. I love what we're looking at here. You know, and this does let a little bit of bias creep into this, not too much, because the kind of testing that we're doing here really, really pushes the bias almost all the way out the door. You know, it's real hard to let your bias dictate how the Cardboard Slayer session goes unless you go out of your way to manipulate it, and you got to go pretty far out of your way. So, you know, like I said, overall, very, very, very happy with the whole experience. You know, for $200, it's really hard to go wrong with this thing. And again, with a proper angle, it probably would have held on a bit longer, but I love my fine edges. I love my mirror polishes. I love my wide bevels. You know, it's just something that I just thoroughly enjoy carrying, and it responds well to the kind of edge I want. You know, that is so nice. That is so nice. And I was told before I sharpened it that these things respond well to a highly polished edge, and yeah, it responded really, really well. And it was so good to have something that could be sharpened after the last month I've had with donkey after donkey after donkey after donkey. Too many lemons in a row. But, you know, I'm getting off track here, and this is getting kind of long in the tooth. And you know I love sharing with you what happened during Cardboard Slayer. That's what happened with this thing. So, all that being said, thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, you guys are awesome. Y'all keep coming in. I appreciate you so much. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We have got our live streams, regular videos. There's plenty of activities. Comments, I love some feedback. Let me know what you think about this whole thing right here. And of course, we're going to plug some products from friends of the channel. Support your friends, and here you go. And as always, we are going to link up to Cutting Lacey EDC's Diamond Emulsion if you want to step your stropping game up, make it easier to sharpen your blades, and keep them sharp. Wonderful product. I use it myself on every single knife I sharpen now. And we are going to link up to Mad Yocco's Wax. If you want to protect your blades that are prone to corrosion, if you want to darken up the color of your micarta, or take care of a million other things, he is going to be on Blade Binge with his wax. Alright, just supporting some friends of the channel and some small businesses. Alright, y'all have a nice day.